Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a deeply researched, fairly dense academic thesis and translating it into a genuinely gripping story. We're going to explore exactly how modern nations engineer their very own identities, literally from the ground up. It's this incredible look at the intersection of media, religion, and statecraft. So, let's dive right in. Picture this. It's the morning of April 14th, 1871. A rented steamer docks in the port of Piraeus. The government has hastily and, rather conveniently renamed it the Byzantium after its 20-day voyage to Odessa, Russia. But get this, it isn't carrying cargo or foreign diplomats. It's carrying the bones of a martyred patriarch, Gregorius V. It sets this incredibly dramatic, almost mysterious tone, right? This was a massive, long-anticipated moment for the nascent Greek kingdom. Part 1. The Return of a Martyr. Now, to really grasp why a government would go to the trouble of renting a whole ship just to retrieve a 50-year-old skeleton, we have to rewind a bit. Exactly 50 years prior, in 1821, Gregorius V was hanged during the absolute earliest days of the Greek Revolution. Fast forward through this super polarizing 30-year reign of King Otto, and we land in 1863 when a brand new monarch, King George I, assumes power. By 1871, the state is celebrating the 50th anniversary of the revolution, the Golden Jubilee, and the absolute centerpiece of the whole thing is the repatriation of this patriarch's relics. And just a quick note, all the fascinating insights we're unpacking today, they come straight from some seriously rigorous academic research, specifically an Oxford thesis by Lykogoras Sophoulis. It is a fantastic deep dive into the ideological development of modern Greece during its Romantic phase. The thesis basically shows how this one massive celebratory event was the crystallization of a highly disputed official religio-national creed. Moving on to Section 2, State, Church, and Monarchy. So, to forge this sense of national unity, the new king, George I, was facing an uphill battle. He had to legitimize his rule to a public that had literally just ousted the guy before him. To do this, he tapped into what scholars call the Great Idea. Now, this wasn't just about drawing new borders. It was this grand, sweeping vision of Romantic nationalism, focused on territorial and population expansion to unify the broader Hellenic world. It became the ultimate dream, the one idea every single politician and intellectual absolutely had to align with. But to pull this off, the state had to make a brilliant strategic pivot. See, during the previous Ottonic era, there was severe, intense polarization between the government and its critics over what role religion should even play in public life. But under the new Georgian era, starting in the 1860s, the state adopts this really clever conciliatory nationalist schema. They explicitly make the Orthodox Church the central, load-bearing pillar of their entire ideology. This pivot resulted in what the source material calls the new Hellenic Christian equilibrium. Religion was totally transformed. It wasn't just a matter of private, quiet faith on Sundays anymore. It became a vital arm of domestic rule, of order, and an incredibly powerful symbol of historical continuity. This distinct, sanctified nationalism created what historians describe as an alternative modernity popping up right there in the Balkan periphery. But here's the catch. Engineering an ideology in the capital city is one thing. Actually broadcasting it to a scattered population, that is a whole different ballgame. Which brings us to Section 3, Print Capitalism Takes Hold. Think about it. How do you actually broadcast this newly engineered Hellenic Christian identity to everyone? Geography alone made spreading a unified message across 19th century Greece a total logistical nightmare. You've got mountainous, incredibly rugged terrain. It's partly an island country. The road network is completely insufficient. Transit is painstakingly slow, and railroads, well, they wouldn't really develop until way closer to the end of the century. So the idea of having a single nationwide conversation seemed, honestly, almost physically impossible. Yet despite those insane physical hurdles, by the end of the 1860s, there were 68 different newspapers circulating in the country. 68! How did that happen? Well, it was a mix of new constitutional freedoms for the press and, crucially, the installation of the telegraph network, which, fun fact, Greece was actually a pioneer of in Europe. This sparked an absolute explosion in active newspapers, feeding a public that was just desperate for information.
Now, it's worth noting these 19th century media outlets weren't exactly independent, unbiased watchdogs. They were often heavily aligned with and sometimes straight up secretly acting as instruments for rival global powers. For example, Athena and Polygenesia supported British interests, Elpis leaned toward France, and Ion was completely backed by Russia. Historical accounts from back then even describe some of these papers as the bribed instruments of foreign powers. But here is the fascinating twist. Even with all that foreign money and their own fierce domestic rivalries, these newspapers were absolutely unanimous in their support for the great idea. They all pushed the exact same irredentist cause. It perfectly proves scholar Benedict Anderson's famous observation that print capitalism made it possible for rapidly growing numbers of people to think of themselves and to relate to others in profoundly new ways. These printing presses were quite literally building an imagined community from scratch.
All right, Section 4. Forging a national identity.
So we've got all the ingredients, right? A new monarchy, a historic church, and a booming, energetic press. The missing link to tie it all together was the intelligentsia. The source material describes the enthusiastic participation of Greek scholars in the daily press as a literal call to arms. Highly educated columnists, literary critics, major historians, they actively used this booming press to intentionally shape the core values underpinning public discourse. They weren't just reporting the daily news, they were essentially writing the software of the new national identity, seamlessly blending ancient Hellenic history with Orthodox tradition. And it all culminated in this incredibly precise nation-building recipe at Step 1, align the new monarchy with the historic Orthodox Church to lock in that Hellenic Christian equilibrium. Step 2, amplify this brand new ideological schema through the booming daily and periodical press, heavily guided by the intelligentsia. And finally, Step 3, broadcast that identity to the masses via a massive, undeniable public ritual, which, of course, brings us right back to where we started. The Golden Jubilee wasn't just a fun anniversary party, it was the ultimate nationwide broadcast. By the mid-1870s, cumulative monthly circulations for Athenian newspapers were hitting up to 30,000 copies. So, when that rented steamer, the Byzantium, docked in Piraeus, carrying the relics of the martyred patriarch, it wasn't just a local event for the people at the port. It was a highly publicized, deeply symbolic ritual designed to physicalize the concepts of the great idea and the unity of state and church. And thanks to the telegraph and the printing press, that message was transmitted rapidly to readers all across the country. This 1871 Jubilee completely proves the enduring power of structured narratives, which leaves us with one final thought. If a 19th century monarchy could forge a unified national identity out of a rugged, disconnected geography using nothing but a steamer, some martyrs' bones, and a handful of printing presses, how are modern nations, equipped with algorithms and instantaneous global communication, engineering who you believe you are today? How are the unseen forces of media, tradition, and statecraft quietly shaping your own identity right now? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it sparked your curiosity to look a little closer at the narratives all around you.